Hello again everybody, back with another video. This video I'm calling Incompetent Scientists or Deceivers, because here we have Patrick Vallance, the Chief Scientific Advisor to the government on COVID-19, or COVID-19 as I should say, and we've got Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer, for advising the government on COVID-19. Or BS19, whatever you want to call it. And these guys basically are calling the shots and setting out what's needed to be done. And this video was filmed on the broadcast. This is a video of a broadcast that was broadcast live on the 21st of September 2020. So it came in after we had the ridiculous rule of 6 in the UK. And it came in as a precursor for all the extra lockdowns and everything that is going on at the moment in the UK. Now, I've left it for some time. I've accrued data to try and challenge what these guys are saying. And this had a massive amount of scare associated with it, because they were talking about exponential growth in cases and exponential growth in deaths. So it was setting out basically quite a scare story, and it's what most policies or whatever nonsense we've got at the moment in the UK is based upon. And you'll see that I don't agree with what they're saying, and I can challenge what they're saying as being incorrect, which means they either aren't the best scientists in the world, which they're meant to be, or they're clearly deceiving. Now, it'd be hard to call them liars because they're very, very careful with what they say. Deceivers is a far better word. So let's play this, and I'll interject with some science as we go through it.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Patrick Vallance, the Government Chief Scientific Advisor, and I'm here with Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer, and we wanted to give you an update on where we see the epidemic at the moment, some of the knowns and some of the uncertainties. What you can see is there's been an increase in cases across all age groups. The lowest increase has been in children and in the population aged 70 to 79, but in every age group we've seen an increase. Could that increase be due to increased testing? The answer is no. We see an increase in positivity of the test done. So we see the proportion of people testing positive has increased, even if testing stays flat.
So you heard what he said then. He said that the increased testing is not a reason for the increased cases. And what he said is they're seeing a greater positivity, which means they're seeing, out of a certain amount of tests, they're seeing more positives now than they did before. Now, he didn't offer any qualification of that. He didn't put any data forward. But let's have a look at what the daily tests are on a couple of dates. Let's look at the start of the lockdown and then the date of this actual broadcast. So we'll go from the 23rd of March 2020 for the first UK lockdown through to the 21st of September 2020 when they made this broadcast. So there's a government website. Here's the link where it is. I'll put it in the description too. And here's a download, an Excel spreadsheet, which is a pretty poor Excel spreadsheet, but that seems to be what the government uses. God-awful, poor spreadsheets. But I've downloaded this, and we'll analyse it. But this is the download, and this is basically the information page of it. So you can see this is a Microsoft Excel file, and we'll come back to the pages in it in the next few slides. So this is from Worldometer. So these are official UK figures. And what I'm going to look at is the testing capacity on the lockdown day, the 23rd of March, and the testing capacity when this broadcast was made on the 21st of September. So let's take a look at the spreadsheet. So this is the spreadsheet And so we're on capacity here. I'm looking at lab capacity. I'll work on that because it gives you an indication to how much testing they're doing. And they didn't have much other information early on. But back on the 23rd, they had 10,949 lab capacity for tests. So just under 11,000 tests they could perform. And when we look at the 21st here, they could perform 391,221. So here we go. So here's the testing capacity on the 21st. If we divide that by the testing capacity on the 23rd of March, we get 35.7. So when they made this broadcast, they had 36 times more testing capacity than they did when they started the pandemic. So if we look here, these are extracts from the Worldometer, so official figures. And on the 21st, we had daily cases of 4437. Bit of code there, but I'm not going there in this one. And on the 23rd of March, they had 877. So what is this figure here for the 21st? If we normalise it based on the testing capacity here, what is it relative to this? Well, we've got 4437 cases. Well, bear in mind, these are positive tests and could be just basically data on flawed testing, or the test could be picking up something else that people have. But anyway, on the 21st we had 4437. So if we divide that by 36 or 35.7, which is the amount to bring it proportionally the same to the testing on the 23rd of March, the 11,000 there. If we divide that by this, we get 124 cases. So here we're quoting 4437, and on the 23rd we had 877 cases. So this looks like it's way higher than we had at the start. But if you normalise that to how much testing they're doing, it's actually only 124. So we're talking about something that's probably 5 times or more less than it was then. But this is the figure they're giving you. It's like saying, right, we've tested 100 cars for faulty brakes and we've found 5 cars with faulty brakes. And then somebody tests 200 cars and they find 10 cars. So does that mean we've got twice as many faulty brakes? No, it doesn't, because the sample size has doubled. This is what they're doing, guys. They're just not normalising data. Now, no good scientist would present data that isn't normalised. I've been a scientist for many years. I've analysed and looked at loads of data. And you have to compare, like with like. So he's either being an awful scientist or he's deliberately deceiving. So you can make your mind up on that. So let's move on.
So we are in a situation where numbers are clearly increasing. They're increasing across all age groups. It's a little bit different in different areas in terms of geographies, and Chris will speak to that. And this increase in numbers is also translating into an increase in hospitalisation, which Chris will say more about. So there's no doubt we're in a situation where the numbers are increasing. What I'd like to do is just remind you how quickly this can move. So the next slide is not a prediction, but it is a way of thinking about how quickly this can change. So this is the UK reported cases per day against time. And you can see running along the bottom there, the number of cases over June, July and August, up to roughly 3,000 cases per day or so in September, middle of September. At the moment, we think that the epidemic is doubling roughly every 7 days. It could be a little bit longer, maybe a little bit shorter, but let's say roughly every 7 days. If, and that's quite a big if, but if that continues unabated, and this grows doubling every 7 days, then what you see, of course, let's say there were 5,000 today, it would be 10,000 next week, 20,000 the week after, 40,000 the week after. And you can see that by mid-October, if that continued, you would end up with something like 50,000 cases in the middle of October per day. 50,000 cases per day would be expected to lead a month later, so the middle of November, say, to 200 plus deaths per day. So this graph, which is not a prediction, is simply showing you how quickly this can move if the doubling time stays at 7 days. And of course, the challenge, therefore, is to make sure that the doubling time does not stay at 7 days. There are already things in place which are expected to slow that. And to make sure that we do not enter into this exponential growth and end up with the problems that you would predict as a result of that.
So this is the graph he's just put up, and these are the actual positive test values. I won't say cases because, as I said before, I don't believe they are cases, they're positive tests. A test only needs to have, even if it's giving 5%, if you're analysing 300,000, then we're at 5%. We're going to be something like 15,000 cases. It's probably in line with where we are, to be honest. But here we go. And what they did was they tagged on a doubling every 7 days. And they were projecting this doomsday figure of 49,000 by the 13th. So on that, the basis of that was the cases here they were seeing in this area here were actually doubling every 7 days. Well, how on earth did they come up with that? So let's expand that section and let's put a best fit straight line in. So this is applying to this area here, look. Now, I can't find an exponential curve there. Can you? That's the best fit is a straight line, which means it's not doubling every 7 days. And it doesn't need to take a scientist, does it, to work that one out? That's the whole basis of what they were saying here. But if you remember, he said ifs and maybes and roughly, all these non-science ambiguous wording, and that's probably to cover their own ass, basically. But the big emphasis was that if we left this unabated, this would happen. But they're going to put measures in to try and stop it. And guess what those measures are? Lockdown on lockdown and lockdown, and stricter and more face nappies and God knows what. But this is what he's based it on. But look at this. What stands out? The big red curve, the doomsday scenario of everybody in the population getting it every day and loads of them dropping down dead. That's what this was about. But flimsy science. So I've gone a little bit further than that. So what I've done here is I've plotted those figures, but from the 30th of August all the way up to the 26th of October, and these are the figures here. So this is a big scale because it's going up to 400,000. But what I did was I plotted a doubling from the 31st on an exponential curve, and bear in mind they would have to come up with a doubling over that period to make that claim, as we've just talked about. And if we follow this, you can see that by the time we get up towards the 26th of October, we would have 360,000 cases a day. And look where we are, that we're down here, around 20. So that supposition was false, or it just didn't add up. But not surprisingly, because we didn't have a doubling every 7 days when they made that video. And any scientist worth their salt would be able to tell that. But they obviously, I feel, wanted to deceive. Now, I have called this video, is it deception or poor scientists? I think these guys know what they're doing. Meant to be a senior scientific advisor. But if we look at that for the 13th when they projected, if you'd have done it from the start here, we'd have been at 100,000 cases or positive tests on the 13th. Now, they were down at 50,000 based on the one that they started somewhere here. But it's on the same thing. But if we left that unabated, so the whole population would be basically positive by mid-December, by the 17th. I've doubled up and I've followed that curve. It looks flat here because this scale is so massive. I'm going up to 65 million. But you can see how ludicrous a claim that was, that it would go up exponentially. How on earth, within that period of time, could you have the whole population a day getting infected? It's nonsense. And I don't believe you could look through anywhere. There's no disease that takes off like that. Now, I've looked at a bigger scale. So this is UK daily COVID positive tests. So this was a government broadcast date. And here we go all the way up to the last one, which I've got on the 26th of October. So the last case, I think, we're around about this area for cases, around about 20,000. But this is using a polynomial order 3 trend line in Excel to give the best curve. But unfortunately, from the 21st, it doesn't give the best curve. Well, it's a little bit later than that. And if we put a straight line on it, you can see that basically we've had a straight line for the last 23 days, rising at 565 positive tests per day. Not exponential. Now, they'll probably claim, oh, yes, it would have been, but we've put all these extra lockdown measures in, the lockdown measures that didn't work in the first place. No. And if you plot that graph that I've just shown you over the top of the graph that Valence showed you, you can see these are right. The scales are a bit out. It's difficult to align, but you can see where we're going and where we would have gone according to theirs. Now, it must be the face masks and the lockdowns, guys, yeah, that's causing this. So let's play on and make a few comments as we finish off this video.
Firstly, we saw very small outbreaks, might be associated with the workplace or another environment. Then we've seen more localized outbreaks, which have got larger over time, particularly in the cities. And now what we're seeing is a rate of increase across the great majority of the country. It's going at different rates, but it is now increasing. And what we found is that as we go through in time, anywhere which was falling is now moving over to beginning to rise, and then the rate of rise continues in an upward direction. So this is not someone else's problem, this is all of our problem. Next slide, please. This graph is a simple one. It simply shows the number of inpatient cases in England over the period from the 1st of August. And until that point in time, there had been a steady fall over a long period of time, right back from early April. And it then stabilized for a period and flattened out. But over the period since the 1st of September, you can see a steady, sustained rise in numbers with a doubling time, as with the cases, of probably 7 or 8 days. Now, what that tells us is that if this carried on unabated, these numbers are relatively small. We're talking about around 200 at the moment. But if we continued along the path that Patrick laid out, the number of deaths directly from COVID, I'll come back to indirect deaths, will continue to rise, potentially on an exponential curve. That means doubling and doubling and doubling again. And you can quickly move from really quite small numbers to really very large numbers because of that exponential process. So we have, in a bad sense, literally turned a corner, although only relatively recently.
So we've turned a corner, a tipping point leading the way to lots and lots of levels of local lockdowns, and who knows, it eventually leading to another national lockdown, because you kind of get the impression that it's the lockdown that they want most of all. Probably to destroy businesses and people's lives and the economy. So, you just heard Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer, claim that this here, in terms of hospital admissions, is doubling every 7 days. And it's going to follow the cases, is what he said. And then the inference is people are going to start dropping dead like mad, dropping dead in the street, you name it. So this here, he's claiming is doubling. Not this bit, he's ignored this because this was when it was coming down and they needed to start the second wave up and start making up their numbers again. But bear in mind we are into seasonal illness, and things like the flu haven't gone away. If the flu really exists as being caused by a virus, I think it's more to do with people becoming susceptible to the natural bacteria that they normally live with as they start to get run down as the sun disappears and the days get shorter. But let's have a look. So I've put the best line I can find through there, and I can't find an exponential line in that data there. It's certainly not doubling every 7 days. That would be this exponential curve like the one he showed us in red. Not Whitty, but Valence earlier. So why did they push exponential growth? We haven't seen it in the cases. We haven't seen it in the hospital admissions. But they both touted this as being exponential, and we need to do things to stop it. Why would top scientists make such an unscientific conclusion? As I say, they're either awful scientists or they're deliberately deceiving. Well, they could be a mixture of both. Who knows? And just to finish this little bit off, this is Worldometer data, and this is the first wave, and this is the dreaded second wave in terms of daily deaths. Just bear in mind the average UK deaths is around 1,700 per day, which is up here. So we've never actually exceeded the UK natural deaths. We have had excess deaths, and we had that probably as a result of the lockdown. But this is what we had in terms of cases. But bear in mind here, they were only doing 10,000 tests a day. But here, they were doing 300,000 tests a day. So if you actually bring this down by the factor of 35 or wherever it is, it won't look quite like this, will it? And this is just the link to the Worldometer website where I've got this from. Now, you've all probably seen the videos of the test centres across the country being empty. There's lots and lots of evidence of that. So that puts some doubt on whether or not this many tests are actually being done in the first place. There's other evidence of them multiplying up false positives or positive results, which are probably one of the same. But the whole thing is very, very shady. But let's listen to what Chris Whitty has to say to finish off with.
The third, however, is very important, and I think its importance should not be understated, which is if the NHS is having to spend a large proportion of its effort in trying to treat COVID cases, because the numbers have gone up to very high levels, and trying to put in place large numbers of systems to try and reduce the risk of transmission in hospitals, it will lead to a reduction in treatment for other areas, in early diagnosis of disease, and in prevention programs. And so there is an indirect effect on deaths and on illness from this impact on the NHS if we allow the numbers to rise too fast.
So now he's saying basically if we let the numbers rise to those exponential figures, which is pure supposition, and as he said, it's a big if. Well, it is because it was never exponential in the first place. He's saying that that's going to basically overwhelm the hospitals, and it's going to stop treatment for other people who need it, and they're going to die. So if this is all kind of fake, then what he's basically admitting is they are actually, by pushing this, going to be ended up killing people. Isn't that what happened in the first lockdown when the hospitals were empty and people couldn't get any treatment? They're already removing treatment in a number of hospitals. But go on then, Chris.
But on the other side, we also know that some of the things we've had to do are going to cause significant problems in the economy, big social impacts on mental health, and therefore ministers making decisions and all of society have to walk this very difficult balance. If we do too little, this virus will go out of control and we will get significant numbers of increased direct and indirect deaths. But if we go too far the other way, then we can cause damage to the economy, which can feed through to unemployment, to poverty, to deprivation, all of which have long-term health effects. So we need always to keep these two sides in mind. My final point is that if I increase my risk, a lot of people say, well, can't people just be allowed to take their own risk? The problem with a pandemic or an epidemic infection like this is if I as an individual increase my risk, I increase the risk to everyone around me and then everyone who's a contact to theirs. And sooner or later, the chain will meet people who are vulnerable or elderly or have a long-term problem from COVID. So you cannot, in an epidemic, just take your own risk. Unfortunately, you're taking a risk on behalf of everybody else. It's important that we see this as something we have to do collectively.
So there you go. If we do too much, and it's all about society and everybody being responsible, we're all in this together. If we do too much, we're going to damage the economy, apparently, cause social impacts, poverty, mental health he mentioned, suicides maybe, deaths from that, people going hungry because they can't afford to buy any food. So that's if they go too far. Well, isn't shutting down the economy or making shops and restaurants and pubs have to allow so few people in, and people are scared to go out anyway because they put the fear of God into them with this virus fiasco. So that's not doing too much. And then thinking about a total lockdowns and tier 3s and tier 4s, local complete lockdowns and all that, that's I think Chris is doing too much. And what else did you say after that? If we do too little, the virus, I think you said, will go out of control. Will? You used a lot of ifs. So is that meaning that you are factually, or you're stating that it will go exponential, which it wasn't? So therefore, you're either a very, very poor scientist or you're a deceiver. I know which side my money's on there. And then it got all personal, didn't it? Why aren't we allowed to take our own personal risk, like we've done with seasonal illness for many, 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 many years, hundreds of years? Why can't we take our own risk? Because by you taking a risk increases the risk to everybody else, and then it will get to your old folk and they will die. So you should all follow whichever draconian nonsense rules we're going to lay out for you, basically, is what it's saying. And you've got to trust them. The ministers are going to make the right decision and the right balance between the economy and our safety. To hell you are. You are just going ahead with whatever plan you've got, and the figures will match what you want them to match as far as I can see. But I wasn't going to go too far into this, but I can't help myself. But let's see what their conclusion to all this is and what we should really trust in.
The final thing we can do is the science, is investing in drugs, vaccines, diagnostics, and Patrick is going to take us through, as the final section, where we've got to with the most exciting of these, which is vaccines.
So the most exciting, the conclusion of all that, is the vaccines, the most exciting part of it. Trust in the science, yeah? But I'm not going to listen to Patrick anymore because I've had enough of this now. Probably you have. I don't want to hear him talking about vaccines. But that's all I've got to say for now. So please feel free to put in the comments what you think. Awful scientists or Deceivers. Or you might want to add a few more comments, who knows. But thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.